are broadcasting to all attendees. We're going to wait just a minute before I start seeing attendees show up, and then we'll go ahead and get going. Now's a good time if you have a glass of water or anything like that to take a drink of water. I want to say hello to our Facebook crowd, our Facebook people. I'm delighted that you're here. And just know that we are trying this for the very first time, doing a Zoom webinar at All Saints and connecting to Facebook at the same time. I think that means as I scroll down on my phone, I can see me. And here I am. Yay. Here we all are. That's fantastic. So Valerie, I can even tell right now, Valerie Ryan is watching. To the Facebook crowd, if you would like to comment during the live cast, the way to do that is through your Facebook comments. Know that there's a little bit of a delay, so we'll try to get those and get those into the stream as we go.
Lori's there.
Also know, and now we're online in our webinar with our attendees that are here as well. And I see Cynthia, Nancy, and Valerie, who is apparently in 2 different places. That's fantastic. Now it's time for me to do our formal introduction. Welcome to the conversation at All Saints. This is a periodic webinar / hopefully podcast / video that will live on YouTube, Facebook, and everywhere else. That is hosted by All Saints Episcopal Church. Our hope is to open the conversation to interesting, compelling, and intriguing conversations that help people navigate life with grace and with peace and with hope. And in times like this, I think I need more grace and peace and hope, and conversations are what help. Our theme this week is creativity in the midst of unsettled times. We are in the midst of what we might call a deconstruction as we go through this time of COVID-19 and our regular patterns of life are deconstructed. We are in the midst of a societal upheaval as we come to terms with the truth about our nation's stories and the ways in which those stories have isolated and silenced people for generations. We are in the midst of an economic challenge and transformation that we will just barely begin to understand in the next coming days, weeks, and months. There's a whole lot going on. And in the midst of times like this, where do we find ourselves on solid ground? Where do we find our footing? One thing we know as we study history is that times like these, as tumultuous as they are interestingly paired with great times of flowering creativity and increasing sense of expression. And what we kind of know as well, and we're going to talk about here, is the linkage of creativity in the midst of chaotic times. What does it mean to live in a time like this? And what role does creativity and the practices of creativity have for us in the midst of this particular time? I love to hear myself speak. I really do. Anybody who knows me and my sermons can tell you that. But I will also say that there are a lot more people here, and I hope that all of this time is filled with all of these people. We have with us this week is the Reverend Cynthia McKenna, who is on screen. On my screen, she's on screen to my right. She is co-host with us tonight, but she's also a licensed psychotherapist, and I've asked Cynthia to weigh in with her psychotherapeutic background. We have Arlene here, who is the Director of Music at All Saints, Arlene Long. Thanks for waving, Arlene. And she is, has been an instructor at Texas A&M University Corpus Christi for quite some time. She's taught musicianships, she's taught classes, she taught piano, studio piano accompanying, and she has recently retired as the artistic director of the Corpus Christi Chorale. We have Sarah Lentz here with us. Sarah teaches composition, creative writing, and literature at Del Mar College, and she's the founder of the Writer's Studio, and I hope, Sarah, you'll say a little bit more about that. Kitty Dudix is here. Thank you for joining us, Kitty, a local artist, a well-regarded artist throughout the region and throughout the country. She was a professor of painting and drawing for 34 years at Del Mar College, and her work is notably included in many private and public collections. So thank you, Kitty. Alice and Alan Barreca are there in their home in Sinton, Texas. Alan earns his keep as a librarian at Delmore College. He is a poet and has authored 4 collections of poetry, the latest of which, The Hamlet of Stittville, collaborates with cartoonist John Klossner. Alice is a semi-retired teacher, like most teachers, doesn't do retirement very well, and is a creative collaborator and is a tremendous creative influence in this parish and in many communities. And finally, we have Michael Quintana. Michael has an MFA from San Jose State University in creative writing, founder of Script Journey, script and story consultation service. And Michael is also the director of digital communications here at All Saints. And this is Michael's inaugural All Saints thing in front of everybody.
Hi, guys.
So we get to introduce Michael to the world. So Michael, thanks for joining along with us. A creative group of people. And I thought we might begin our conversation with some instructions for the Zoom group and for the Facebook group. If you're a Zoom user and you're online, send your chats to participants and panelists. If you're on Facebook, again, like I said, you can comment with a question on the Facebook comments and we'll try to get to them as well. Some rules for us as we do this work. This is a conversation, so please feel free to ask questions and we'll get to them as quickly as we can. Let's take a moment to do what hasn't been done yet, which is to get quiet. So let's hold a reverent silence for probably, in the world of broadcasting, a painful 5 or 10 seconds as we center ourselves. So a moment of silence as we take some deep breaths before we continue. And amen. So, dear friends, let's begin with an exploration of the terms that we have in front of us. Creativity. What do you think that means when we talk about creativity? Anyone want to weigh in on that? Here comes Alan. Alan, we got you.
Okay, well, I mean, technically, it's just the recognition of patterns and putting the patterns back together.
Say more about recognizing patterns.
Well, I mean, there's so many, like in poetry, it's observing and trying to observe something that others may not. But then when you move to the page, the patterns become the sounds of the words, the length of the lines, the motif. I'm a narrative poet, so I'm always telling stories, the motifs of the stories, how to turn the story. But it all starts out with pattern recognition.
Yeah,
pattern recognition. Michael.
When I think about creativity, I think of you almost step away from reality to understand reality. It's like this, you just step a little bit away and you're doing something that's not really part of the physical world, but will be part of the physical world. And it's just to help you interpret what you've experienced.
So what happens a lot in my conversations with people about creativity is this idea that to be a creative, the noun, right? To be a creative person, there's a product that you're creating. And my sense and my contention is that that's not necessarily what we're talking about when we're talking about participating in creative practice. That participating in creativity is not always linked to the thing, whether it's a painting or a sculpture. It's also, Michael, it sounds like a little bit of where kind of you are as a person, right? Am I getting at it that way?
Yeah, because sometimes you'll work on something or you'll do something and then you'll look back at it and you're like, who was I at this point when I created that one thing? You know, it's like a little benchmark.
Yeah.
feels to me like it's finding our imagination, getting acquainted with our imagination, which is a wonderful word.
Oh, I love that word.
I like that word better than creativity in a way, because it contains magic, which is wisdom. The magi,
right?
but the wise men, and I just love that. I like to play with words there.
Yeah, breaking that apart. Kitty, what were you going to weigh in with?
Well, one of the courses that I taught at Del Mar for many years was an art course that education majors were required to take. And they were, education majors, so they had never had any art before. And at the beginning of the class, we talked about creativity. And it really simply means trying anything new. It doesn't matter whether you're cooking or creating a garden or whatever you're doing, it's trying out something new. That's creativity in a nutshell.
I like that.
And it becomes, as an artist, it becomes really the best addiction anybody could have, because it's safe and you're learning things about yourself and the world, and it has so many wonderful aspects. I think we could heal a lot of people from some bad addictions if they would just switch their medium.
Well, so there's something that happens in the midst of a creative space. And Sarah, I know that part of the things that you're doing is helping people. You've facilitated already a group here at All Saints. You do this work with the Writers Studio. There's another group coming up that you're facilitating. This idea, as Kitty, you mentioned, getting into a different place. There's this kind of transportation that happens when you sink yourself into that creative space. And how do you experience that as you encourage people to participate in writing and journaling?
Oh, that's a great question.
I put you on the spot. I like to do that.
Well, for me, creativity is a verb. It's to make something. And I don't like the terminology of product, right? Because that commodifies it. And what I've really been into lately is the writing that I create for myself. And really into the private journal and the value in that when I'm in this space that is private for my creation, that it's just me and my thoughts and whatever, that is a safe space that allows things to come out that wouldn't otherwise. And in the creative writing classes that I teach and the workshops that I teach, a lot of people need that permission and need to be able to do that, to reach that expressive point. And it can be very hard because it feels very vulnerable to create something. And so the most valuable thing for me as a writer has been to rely on ritual.
Really?
Really. And I think that there's a real spiritual connection with that we become anything that we do daily, like an addiction or like a habit that is positive, that fulfills something in us, brings about good, that is very grounding. And I see a real connection to, some of the daily routines that I've been doing during the shelter in place, like praying Compline on Facebook every with All Saints, and also coming to my journal every day. And there's something about that repetition, that ritual, that allows that creative spirit to flourish.
Reminds me a little bit of what Alan, you said about patterns, that there's this sense of flow. I've heard Arlene, you and I talk about flow a bunch. This idea that there is a sense of flow and pattern. And is it a sense that we're making that, or more that we're putting ourselves in it, or maybe it's both? I mean,
it's got to be both, I think.
Say more.
It's back and forth. It's like the martial arts push hands. Sometimes it's this and sometimes it's that. And we have to have the freedom and flexibility and willingness to let go, to let it be wherever it is when it is doing whatever it's doing.
Okay. So it's both something that kind of exists in kind of a cosmic sense, a mystical sense outside of us. It's also something, this flow that exists within us. We're part of it. And then the creative space, opened maybe by ritual. I'd never thought of that, Sarah. Thank you. Kind of opens us into that, or creates a spaciousness for us to participate in that creative, energetic place. Sarah, you wanted to follow up.
I also want to talk about flow as a psychological phenomenon. And I wonder if Mother Cynthia can speak to psychological background, like this idea that, psychologists have studied flow states in musicians and in scientists and in creative people, where they enter this state of mind where they're so absorbed in what they do and what they're doing in that process, that sense of time, or even sense of I'm doing this, I'm writing this, or I'm playing this instrument disappears.
Yes, you have to.
It's interesting because for me, when I'm really creative and I'm working a lot, it's like Alan says, it's recognizing patterns, being in flow, but it's almost as if you're being obsessed with something, because what possesses my imagination will also send me on like a creative curve. So like I'm thinking back to the times when I was obsessed with Janis Joplin, and I would just listen to Janis's music. And I would just be wondering what she was like and what she dressed like and what things would smell like during the time she was alive. And then it just like started to imprint on all my fiction and all my writing, just like wanting to be in that time period and figuring out that pattern, plus that with Marilyn and then James Dean and everybody in that club, you know?
You are an old soul, my God.
Oh my goodness. So then, what's interesting, and I'm going to get to Cynthia in a second here, because, we're living in a state. Well, which state are we living in? I mean, my goodness, we're living in a place and a time and a reality that has a lot of, pick the word, struggle, chaos, turmoil, upset. We talked about it, deconstruction. And at the same time, we're also talking about, not living there? We're talking about creativity? We're talking about escapism? Are we talking about kind of putting ourselves in someplace else? Or is it, what is that when we kind of get in that space?
Well, I want to comment that one thing that Matisse said, he was criticized a little bit during his career in the 40s because he wasn't painting Sturm und Drang. He was painting amazing, beautiful still lifes and figures that were stunning color-wise and harmoniously and just very inviting. And he said, this is during the wartime. I think one of his friends had to go, to the concentration camps, or his family member, I don't know what all, but he said, so, I'm going to concentrate on beauty and on joy. That's what I'm going to produce.
So that puts you in a different space. And that, my sense is that can be helpful, right? Yeah. That can allow you to kind of hold what it is going on without this sense of escapism.
It's a big silent space that makes space for something to bubble up that you didn't know was there. Or maybe you intended for it to be there, but you had to wait for it to present itself.
Yeah.
That's why ritual helps. Ritual helps,
Yes.
suiting up. Because
Suiting up.
You got to suit up, because it's like the same thing with when you take a walk and you're by yourself, I become enthused with my surroundings, and then I get into thoughts and prayer, and it's very much a part of my creative process is walking. Very much. It turns on things and visually stimulates. It's visually stimulating, but it also turns on thinking patterns.
Music calls this practice. And we talk about practice at church all the time. What is a practice? Which is a ritual, which we don't always know what's going to happen, but if we go to the practice and wait, it will tell us. We don't tell it, it tells us.
I kind of feel like as we're talking, all the things that we're talking about I've experienced, but it seems to be like this imagination thing. It kind of like correlates best with the first draft.
Yeah.
And then as you move towards the final product, and as you sit and you work on a poem over and over and over again, wherever you started, you become farther and farther distant. And there's almost something therapeutic in that, because you end up dealing with what caused you to start writing in the first place, at least some of the time. So it seems like it's this really long, hard process from first idea, what you get when you're walking, till, some publisher taking a poem. And all that stuff is involved somewhere there in between.
I think about the sermon from Sunday, planting seeds. You get the seed and then you have to garden. You have to do all the gardening work, Alan, which I think is what you're talking about. The craft of refining it and weeding it and watering it. All of that is done over time. But it starts with a seed.
The first idea is like the rock for the pillow. And then you say, so what? Talking about Sunday's sermon.
Yeah.
You talk about so what, and it's the so what that pushes you onto your final product.
And then in the midst of times like these, I'm looking at you, Cynthia, you're sitting across the table. There's a real sense that we are in a challenging time. And it doesn't take an expert in psychotherapy, and I'm certainly not, to recognize the emotional weightiness, and it's been commented on many times. What role then do we see these patterns playing in the midst of good mental health care, or good kind of coping in times like these?
Well, one of the things that's happened, whether we're conscious of it or not, we have lost so much. We're very adaptive, and we're functioning, we're getting our day-to-day stuff done. But if you think about what you were doing 6 months ago versus what you do in your day now, or what were you doing last July versus what you're doing today, I don't know about you, but it's maybe 180 degrees different for me. And we have lost graduations, vacations. Some of us have elderly parents that we can't see, or new grandbabies that you can't hold. There's a deep ache in our unconscious as well as our conscious selves. So in order to survive and function, we kind of compartmentalize. But when we can put pieces in place, like a ritual, like routine, like noticing beauty through our day, we start giving ourselves a room to lean on. We give ourselves some space to operate in. And I would say, Sarah, with the flow, I think your ritual creates the space for that flow. It's like your habits make something that's bigger than the sum of the parts. Does that answer that?
Yeah. So what it sounds like too, and this is the, one of the great things we're experiencing is, at least I know I'm experiencing it as somebody who participates in creativity and has found some new creative places to land, and we'll get to those in just a minute. But I find as I do that work, it's like separating myself out from the regular everyday into this other space where that creative flow is going, allows the other stuff that is the pressing stuff of the day, the real big narrative, to find its kind of landing space apart from the initial space of freak out and panic. Maybe it's integrative. That's a word that's been helpful for me, is that there's a sense of putting it together that happens almost unconsciously when I find my time set aside to do that creative stuff. Now here's, okay, I'm gonna Sarah, I'm gonna let you say one thing and then I'm gonna ask another question.
Okay, cool. Because I want to talk on that like a lot of this pandemic has been very anxiety producing, right? And I recently was reading an article on NPR that they have a new name for that. It's called doom scrolling. When you're scrolling through your social media and reading all this terrible news. And I thought, doom scrolling is a lot about what my mind does when I let it chatter on its own. And so for me, writing in a journal allows for a solid place, a container for that. So I can get it out of my mind and I can stop that anxious circular chatter, and it's very calming. So I totally agree with what you're saying.
So then here's a question. If we were to imagine that either maybe somebody's watching or somebody will watch us later on, or a conversation that you might have down the road with somebody who might say, that's all well and good, but you're a writer and you're an artist and you're a musician. I'm not any of those things. I'm not a poet and I'm not a writer and I don't design stuff. I'm not a creative person. How does that land? Okay, Arlene, I saw you grimace. Okay, say where that grimace comes from. Keep going.
That's our ego speaking. We think we're not good enough. I'm the perfect example. Zoom just scares the pee waddling out of me. And y'all are used to it. What we're not familiar with or what we don't trust ourselves about is scary to us. I have to read this. It's a little bitty thing. Come sit down beside me, I said to myself. And although it doesn't make sense, I hold my own hand as a small sign of trust. And together I sit on the fence.
I love that.
I find that
That's
very
so good.
descriptive of sitting on the fence. Yeah.
I wanna just say that in that very same class, the education class, the art education for education majors, I did a lot of reading and research because that's what I had to teach that course. And most people stopped coloring at about age 11. That's about 5th grade. You can go back yourself and remember how it was to color and how much you enjoyed coloring. And then maybe by 6th grade, there's some little artist or two in the class and the teacher recognizes their work and puts it up and they're the artist and everyone else feels bad. And so they say, well, I'm just going to take that flute class, or I'm going to really get into sports or whatever. And so the fun thing for me in teaching that class is that within a week, the students were all drawing. These are people that had never had any art in school, except when they were little and drew when they stopped at 11. So it's sad that what society does to people and, stops us, that if we're not wonderful at it, we can't do it. And the truth is everybody can do it and everyone is an artist.
Amen. That fits with the I can't sing class that I teach every once in a while. For people who say to me, I can't sing. I go, yes, you can, but you don't.
I think
You
that's really,
You got it.
I think it's really interesting what Sarah was saying about the doom scrolling. It's like she said, it was like our minds chatter where we get like very intense with ourselves, but now it's part of the external world. So having a creative outlet and a place to retreat is so important because it's almost as if we have to deal now how to control the inside because it's happening on the outside and trying to make space for managing both now. So we have these two things that are happening. It's just a lot of noise and you just have to find places to create a container like Sarah was saying and put it somewhere and be like, this is how I'm going to navigate how I feel, how I can control this little aspect. And What's really interesting is everything, it sounds like when I'm hearing you guys speak and everything, it sounds like we're all looking for a place to focus, put our attention on something, then we deal with it. And like when Alan is talking about polishing and stuff, we're dealing with it. We're curing what we've created. And then we have to figure out a way to leave it behind and then move to the next thing, you know, because a lot of art is leaving it behind and deciding I'm done with this right now.
Oh, that's fascinating.
Next one.
Oh, that's so good. Alice.
I'm exactly that person that you just described and that Kitty is describing. I wish I had I did my education degree back a long time ago, and I did not have Kitty as a teacher, but I would have said all of that I'm not an artist, I can't draw, etc. And about 5 years ago, I discovered an art form called Zentangle. That's probably backwards.
No, it's not. It's
good.
It's perfect.
It corrects it. Zoom corrects
to
it.
you, it's not. Okay. So it's all about making patterns. And then you take those patterns. So first you learn the patterns, just like we do when we learn how to read music or finger the notes or sing the scale. And then you combine those patterns in creative ways to make little tiny pictures.
Oh,
And these
so great.
this is a circle that's about, I don't know, about 4 inches across. And the people who created this are Rick Roberts and Maria Thomas. They're a married couple. And their motto is, anything is possible, one stroke at a time. And so I think, you know, that could be a stroke of the artist's brush. That could be a stroke of a pen. That could be a beat of a piece of music, one note at a time. Anything is possible. And so that has really, this concept of Zentangle kind of started me on my artist journey, and it's a journey I had never taken before, so it has been delightful.
That's so good. I think what I would love to do next, because we have a bunch of creatives here, and I know that I know each of you reasonably well. What are you working on, or what's bubbling up in you, or what has bubbled up in you in these recent months that you would want to share or talk about in this space?
Well, I had a real serious problem because, you know, my stock in trade is irony and irreverence.
Is say that again. Is what?
Irony and irreverence, which just seems to be out of step with our world. And so I really had to convince myself that I could still write and find things of writing. And it's been hard. I've worked more on reviews than my own poetry lately.
Is that because of the pandemic and the world that we're in right now?
Yeah, well, I can read the one poem that started me writing again, which isn't the poem that you know, but it's safe, Jonathan, don't worry. It was called COVID Affected Thoughts, and Robin Karstensen is eventually going to put it on the Tama CC blog. Irony in the time of plague pales. A toilet paper eating virus fails to amuse as we hide from it and one another, paint our door jambs with the blood of lambs mixed with 60% alcohol. Not sure if faith should be placed in God or science or both. This angel of death shall pass, and most of us will survive to be extinguished in some future and forgettable manner. And so my old friend irony stands a chance to be revived, but I'm not sure I will hold him as dear, for my psyche and my age seems to be drifting towards a renewed awareness of the sincere.
Mm.
Oh, wow.
Oh yeah.
That's really good.
So I
That kind of
can
like
hear.
opened up a door and said, okay, you can write again.
So I could hear in those words, and because I know you, Alan, what I hear in those words is the work. I hear the careful holding of those words. I think part of what I guess I know frustrates me as an armchair artist of various kinds is, boy, I want to be a poet and I want it to come like that. I want to be an artist and I want to sit down and paint a Kitty Dudek's painting with my colors. But there's this, what I hear in your work, and everybody in this room has work that I admire, is that the creative experience is this wonderful holding of playfulness, but also, Sarah, as you said, of discipline and paying attention to it and holding it. So even the creative who finds creative expression in a garden and growing tomatoes, which I, for some reason, can't do, it just takes time. It takes patience. It takes work. It takes mindfulness. And I think that's something we need to remember in a world, in a culture that is about an immediate payoff. Maybe part of what we need to recognize is that this creative path that we are created to be in is really our life's work, and it is indeed a journey. It's work. It's a path. It's a long one. It's not a sprint. Anyways, what else is anybody working on? Who else is working on some stuff that you want to share?
Earlier this year in December, I was diagnosed with a breast cancer tumor. So I had a lumpectomy, but it was scheduled I had 2 weeks to think about it before the lumpectomy. So in that, every day then I began making what's called a mandala, which is in a circle, everything contained within the circle. And, ideas just flowed to me, and it was basically about dealing with the nerves and fear and expressing it. And I named the tumor Trixie. And I was, and so each painting evolves as she makes herself known. And then I had some dreams, so I interpreted those. And, I was getting ready to have something cut out. So one of the dreams was about an alligator, coming with a knife. And anyway, I did the haiku poetry with them, and that was very satisfying. At the very last one, where there's a little hole, a little circle within the circle, it's filled with roses. So that was just such a wonderful thing to be able to do with my nervous energy and my healing. Right now I'm back to painting glorious sunrises and sunsets, which I love, taking walks at the beach, because some mornings when it's partly cloudy and very low wind, you get reflections on the water and you get stunning colors in the sky. And so I'm back to what I was doing before Trixie. And I have a different attitude now about Trixie. I'm grateful for her because I've made so many changes in my life with 7 essential steps that I'm taking for a complete healing that's natural and without radiation and without chemo. And so I'm thankful for her because she came as a warning. You need to change some things. And so every day I walk 45 minutes and, I'm doing a bunch of work stuff, layers of other work with a therapist and soul work kind of. And it's been a good thing. So now if I paint her, she's going to be a little something that I'm grateful for.
Oh, that's amazing. That's amazing. Cynthia? you've been working on some stuff. What are some of the creative practices you've been jumping into? I'm putting you on the spot.
You are, and I'm going to take my headphones out because I can hear myself and it echoes. It's driving me crazy. I'm good the rest of the time. It's like, okay, I can't even thoughts. So a lot of people made bread during the pandemic. It was like a phase where everybody was doing sourdough. I'm an old bread baker, so I did like cheese grits. So I was like all the different kinds of grits I could find and different recipes. So just playing is what I was doing. You know this, I've been spinning for a long time, and through an interesting set of circumstances, I've been cleaning wool and spinning wool and enjoying that process with the cat, because the cat likes to play with the wool as well. What else have I been doing? I don't know. Lots of things.
Well, part of the set of circumstances is that Jennifer, my wife, is a fiber artist weaver,
Right.
and she got us into paying attention to wool and fiber, and then it spun into get the pun? It spun into should we be weaving?
Hey, you're a poet.
Should we be spinning wool? And then so now I'm spinning wool. Cynthia, you're back on the wheel spinning.
Mm-hmm.
There's fiber everywhere in our house.
Mm-hmm.
And there's this whole deep dive that is happening in the Wickham house about fiber and the stories of fiber and the stories of the sheep.
Yeah.
My sister raises sheep in northern New York, so it's been this nifty connection. I think what's weird about that I'm finding, and I think we talked about this, Cynthia, is there's when you sink into that flow, there's worlds within worlds within worlds. And I don't know that I knew that. This is my first real, I think, artistic deep dive. Maybe it's not the first, but it's one of the only a few, I guess.
And wait, I'm an old school teacher, so you have to have show and tell. So then they're gifting their work to us.
Good.
So this is spun from a sheep that Jonathan's sister raised and fleeced, and that Jonathan spun and Jennifer dyed.
Wow.
So awesome creative collaboration.
So when I got into fiber, this was a long, long time ago, Mary Earl and I were going to a friend's wedding, and we decided to go to Ingram and look at fiber up there and learn from her spinning teacher. And she and I have had many, many dates that we call Pat the Fiber, and we go and find something beautiful and just hold it. I mean, just holding those fleeces, Alice, just holding that ball is just such a gift. I mean, I think in this creative process, for whatever you decide to dive into, there's a lot of joy if you can let yourself rest in it. And I've got some fiber if you want some.
Anyone else
Can we
working
put
on
a co in front of the word creative? I'm hearing everybody is not alone. We're working collaboratively.
Yeah, yeah.
We're working with spirit. It's a
Oh, that's nice.
co-creation.
Yeah.
I would like that word better.
Well, so then the co-creator reminds us of our story. I mean, that's that we are in the Hebrew scriptures, and also I would say outside of the Hebrew scriptures into the mythological framework of humanity. There's the sense that humanity is birthed out of a creative urge of some other space, whether that urge is God, as you name God, or however you name it. But there's this sense of emergence in humanity that holds on to some of that divinity that is creating, and that we are participants in that creativity, and that we're meant to keep doing that. So yeah, we're co-creating with our Creator as well. There's this sense that it's ongoing. Sarah, yeah.
Where to start? So, Kitty, I can so relate to what you were saying about using your art through trauma. And I hadn't even realized that I'm a thyroid cancer survivor. And when I was awaiting my surgery, I had a very similar experience to you, that what do you do with all that anxiety? And because I already had a writing practice in place, it just ended up pouring out in the pages. And then after a long process of revision, it became the second half of the last book that I finished. So I forget how trauma and the difficult things in my life actually become very valuable to my art, and there's a redemption there. And what I've been working on, this pandemic has went on so long that my writing process has evolved. I have these, we have these projects and then we set them aside. When the pandemic started, I was doing this poem a day project in early February. And so by April, I had a whole series of pandemic poems. And then I decided to set that aside, and I recently started a novel. And so I went poetry where I'm noticing these really minute bite-sized pieces of my life to moving into a more imaginative realm. And it's a unique shift, and that's the richness of creation, is where your inspiration is coming from always changes. If you don't mind, I'll read my pandemic. Okay. Oh, and I also have to say, I've taken the plunge during the pandemic and have started sketching along with my writing. And so
that's
for you.
of some bananas in my journal.
Okay, with the sticker and everything.
I know what I see.
Good for
This
you.
one was called It's Bananas. I heard on a radio report that since the pandemic has closed down schools, wholesale fruit sellers don't know what to do with thousands of single bananas. The supermarkets only want bunches and bunches. When I was a kid, I tried purposefully to slip on peels. Was it really as easy as I'd seen on TV? It wasn't. When Sandy was in intensive care dying, as her kidney function ground down, I remember after we left, I saw a banana peel, frozen solid, black, and curled in on itself. Then there was this afternoon, 12 roly-polies munching greedily in what must have been bug ecstasy on a sun-yellow slip of banana peel, center of my green lawn.
Wow.
Delightful. Delightful.
Thank you, Sarah.
Good.
And Michael also knows the process too, right? He was in a writing group with me where we critiqued and worked over and nitpicked everything in that poem. So, and it was recently published in an online venue called Tejas Covida, which is an online poetry journal dedicated to Texas writers writing about the COVID pandemic. It's cool. You should check it out.
So good.
So now is a good time for us to kind of hold that space. I want to make sure we have time to answer any or give some feedback that we're hearing. One of the pieces of feedback from the Facebook group says there is also a real gift in letting go of many of those routines and tasks that we previously had. It takes an openness for the creator to insinuate itself more in our lives. This idea that these regular patterns that we get into in life, that interruption, well, say a little bit more about that. Anyone?
Yeah, that really struck a chord with me, because I know that before the pandemic happened, I was working on a screenplay, and then I didn't want COVID brain to affect how I was going to tackle these scenes, because the charge was different. I was in a very different headspace. So then I took up gardening. And so that became my obsession. And I was just going to Sutherland's and Walmart and just like collecting plants and clippings and root stimulators, just trying to grow stuff. And so that's actually where I'm at right now. So what's happening?
Yeah, so there's this interruption that creates an openness for who knows what else. That's fascinating.
But
We
I
have
learned
someone
so
else.
much, for sure.
We have
Yeah.
someone that recommended a book, The Artist's Way, and that got a couple of
Yeah.
loves
Julia
and a
Cameron.
yay.
Julia
Are there any other?
Cameron.
Yeah, right. Yay! Clap for The Artist's Way.
Yeah.
You know, that reminds me. Then there are a lot of voices in this, and I know that the Writer Studio. This is a conversation you're having, and that I know that Sarah, you founded it. Michael, you're a partner in that, as is Alan. Say more about that, but also any other resources that we all might have that kind of can help kind of stir that.
So I founded the Writer Studio last July. We just had our 1-year anniversary, and our kickoff a year ago was completely different. A huge in-person gathering. But I founded Writer Studio because I wanted to create a community for people that wanted to write. I wanted to bring together writers and inspire them, and also teach craft aspects of creative writing. And so we just have made our full pivot online. We are now offering all of our courses on Zoom. We're community-based, volunteer-based, so we're able to offer all of our classes for free. And I'll put the link to the website. It's just writersstudio.org. You'll find all of our class listings. There's one coming up. The next one is on Saturday, August 8th, and I'll be teaching that.
A wonderful resource. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
And I'll mention the Art Center asked me to have an exhibit, which I just put up, but I'll be having a formal opening to it in September, because right now is not a good time for openings. But it's called Before the Wall. It's the Rio Grande Suite, and I showed it at Del Mar years back, and I feel very strongly, because I was brought up on the border in Brownsville and Laredo and grew up in a dual culture, and have been very sad about the border wall, even though I think it's important. I love the views that I grew up with, so that's the name of the exhibit. And so it'll be up through October at the Art Center, but upstairs in the Bayview room, which is kind of above Citrus, above their restaurant. And anyone can go on the days that they're open. And then in October, I'll be teaching a workshop for painters, and I'm just now formulating it. It can be for beginners through whatever. And a friend of mine was complaining because she's a teacher, and she said, I want to be able to take it. So I think I'm going to try to do Tuesday for people that don't work and Saturday for people that do work, so that different people can attend. So that'll be in the fall at the Art Center.
Excellent. And I know coming up here at All Saints, there's an opportunity for us to share our creative journey. And Alice, you're hosting that for us, and that's a Zoom-based gathering, right, on Friday night?
Right. We're calling it The Garden, and for All Saints people, we used to call this event the Garden of Reading, and that was an in-person gathering. But the remake of the Garden, the Garden New and Reimagined, will be on Zoom. And Arlene has gathered some music for us from different musicians. Jennifer Pitchinson Hartsfield has some artwork she's going to show and talk about. Phyllis Finley has some artwork she's going to show and talk about. Alan's going to read some poems. I'm hoping Sarah will read a poem. Michael?
I will bring something.
You'll bring something? All right, awesome.
And say what it is. It's
and
kind
it's
of
like
an
an
open mic gathering, right?
Right, so everyone's invited. The information how to find the link will go out tomorrow. And so you come and join us and bring a poem or a song or a piece of artwork to share. And you can even bring something that you didn't create, but that is like Arlene read that poem to us. you can share something that is just very special to you and you want to share it with the group. So please come and join us to the garden, Friday night, 7 o'clock. Oh, and maybe I should put my email in the chat in case people need to email me for that information. I'll do
We
that.
can put that in the Facebook comments.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll put that in. Cynthia, can you do that?
I can.
And then I know also one of the coolest side effects of this time, I mean, I hate to say it, it's weird to say this, but one of the interesting emergences in this time is how we've been as a church challenged to be creative with our liturgy, our Sunday morning worship services. And what that's meant for us is to say goodbye temporarily, to say goodbye to a lot of stuff, including the choir that we're accustomed to having fill the entire space. Arlene, you did something early on that is still emerging. And I'd love for you to say a little bit about that, where you kind of sent a word out to musicians and invited, one or two, solos or duets or trios
Yes.
to make music. And all these music makers, say more about it.
Well, the choral musicians are all in deep grief because many of them will sing solos or duets, but many will not. More will not than will. And so all our buddies, we can't sing together, and singing will be the last thing that comes back because obviously what comes out of your mouth you don't want to share. So in terms of COVID. So yes, I just said, please offer yourself. Choose one thing. I found that most people didn't. They were waiting for me to tell them. So I'm digging around, looking for things that I think might suit their person, their voice, the time in the liturgical year that we're in. It's a very much of a rhythm thing, and we need to honor that. And then primarily, what do we all need from music today? We are in not a happy place. We don't need a polka, or we don't need seductive music. We need calm, comforting, a certain amount of recognition of our grief, and yet we can't live there. We have to go into our faith. So that's been really a struggle for me personally to figure out, okay, what do we need and what's going to work? And that's my job.
Wonderful.
So to make a space here where people who might not be so brave would tackle singing their favorite song. I don't care if it's Jesus Loves Me or something in Spanish or something in Latin, whatever you have that's meaningful to you. And that we have to lay that out there somewhere.
Beautiful.
So that's what we're.
Would that be on the Friday night thing, the garden of reading, or the garden?
No,
thing?
it could be, but what's on the garden so far is a person who has always wanted to do piano, and she's had some piano lessons. She plays for herself, and it's lovely. A person who, I don't want to give this away, who...
Well, you don't have to. Let's say more about it. The garden is a place for people to share in a smaller community. The Sunday morning liturgy has been people sharing for the church worship as it goes out into the entire
Oh,
yeah, that's
okay.
very different.
So that's kind of how that works.
Yeah.
All right.
And we got a question asking if you could come to the garden if you didn't want to share anything. And I said, yes, we need people to be receptive enjoyers.
You still need to contact Alice to get in because it's a Zoom group, so you need to get the entry information. So,
Yeah, but yes, we need it. We need poets need an audience. Artists need viewers. So yes, please. Singers need an audience. Musicians need an audience. So yes.
So it's coming up on our time. And I see a comment here. Somebody saying that taking piano lessons during the pandemic, I continue and enjoy and love my lessons from Cindy Sullivan, one of our creatives here at All Saints of Delight. And another writer on the comment says it's important also to be gentle with ourselves and recognize that getting out of bed may be the most creative things we do sometimes. And that is a wonderful invitation for treating yourself with mercy and kindness. Well, our time is coming to a close. There's more of this conversation to have, and I hope that you'll have it with yourself, with a neighbor, with a friend, but I want to give this group a chance to get the last word. So I'm gonna start, and when I say last word, I mean, because you're artists, it's not gonna be a word, but maybe a modicum of words. So I'm gonna start. Who wants to get us started with the last word?
I'll start. It's a story about a gumdrop. I'll make it really short. A third grade teacher had gumdrops, a tree with gumdrops for her students to learn to give a gumdrop to somebody that they felt had done something positive and helpful. And then one day, a kid got a bad grade on a test and was crying about it. And the teacher gave the boy crying a gumdrop and said, this is what you do for yourself when things don't come out like you like them to. And all of us take risks. Every time we create anything, we take risks. We may not like it. Give yourself a gumdrop.
Oh.
Fantastic. Ooh, mic drop there.
Last words, anyone?
You know, what has bounced around my head listening to you talk, especially the question about what if I'm not a poet or whatever, it has to do with intention. You know, if you're writing and you're writing for yourself, or you're writing, you're a grandparent and you're writing a poem so your grandkid remembers you 20 years from now, it doesn't, you know, it's a different standard than if you're trying to break into the New Yorker or something, which about 10 people in America can ever do. So it's all about intention. Don't worry about it. Just enjoy.
Yeah.
Amen.
Good.
The only thing I could think about is how excited I am to see what kind of art and stuff comes after this, because I know up until the pandemic moment, it was very dystopian future. You know, there's a lot of dystopian stuff, but I wonder what comes after. What interests us now, and what kind of things are we interested in absorbing? Like, are we looking to comedy, and what type of comedy? You know, things like that. It's like, are we looking for horror or true crime? But why? Why these things? Why now? That's what I ask myself.
Yeah.
Any other last words?
Yeah, I'll say something real quick. A few weeks ago during Compline Story Time, Mother Cynthia read The Important Book by Margaret White Brown. She also wrote Goodnight Moon, and Alice chose that book, I believe. And the book ends with, the important thing about you is that you are you. And I think that everyone that seeks to create needs to remember that there's no one exactly like you. Your life experiences, the things you notice, who you are is so unique that no one can create exactly what you're creating. And that's why it has value. That's why you have to do it.
Thank you.
That's great.
Another one.
We're done.
Any other last words?
Well, I'll just say, for anybody that wants to color, go get a circle, you know, make about a 6-inch circle and draw whatever you want to in the circle. If it's a pattern, let it be a pattern. If it's some straight lines, let it be that. If it's a circle within a circle, or if it's a whatever it is, and that's called a mandala, and it's very safe to do something in a circle.
Thank you. Alice.
In Zentangle, they talk about the beauty of limits. And that's the circle. Yeah. And so we're in this tiny world where we're limited. And right now, our world has shrunk and it feels very limited. But within those limits, we can find beauty.
True.
Like
and meaning. And meaning.
And meaning. Yeah. Cynthia.
Yeah, I want to echo what was said earlier about getting out of bed. You know, right now, I think one of our tasks to ease into the creative space is to be very gentle with yourself, to give yourself a lot of extra spaciousness, to remember that you've gotten through hard times before, and to stay connected to friends, because it can be very isolating, even if you're in a family. And creativity is a fantastic way to connect with other people.
So in the performing world, they say mic drop, right?
Yeah.
All around the room, everybody. Mic drops for all y'all. Thank you for having a conversation.
Thank you.
And
Right,
dear friends,
thanks for
as
having
you are
us.
online, wherever you are, have a conversation. Talk about it. Talk about it with yourself. Talk about it with a neighbor. Maybe you can connect with the community that you see here. Maybe you can connect with community anywhere.
Facebook.
And have a conversation. It's a conversation of love. It's a conversation with your creator who loves you very dearly and created you to be beautiful. And you are in the midst of beautiful creativity everywhere you go. And I'm grateful to be in the midst of this group of creatives. God's peace to you all. God's blessings. Thank you for joining us. Take care of yourself. Guard your health and guard the health of your neighbor, and be well.
Bye,
Amen.
everybody. Great seeing y'all.
Bye.
Love you all. Bye-bye.
Love you guys.
Thank you.